This is the Real to Real, and we've got a lot to talk about today. As always, the real movies and the created movies, which are really a reflection of the real thing, just from a different point of view, and our positions in real time and the true reality life is always subject to our objective viewpoint and our agreement. And that is what the movie producers are creating, with agreement on the subject, the title, the enhancement of the either historical or fictional events of which they describe. And that's what the Real to Real show is all about, the real to real movie of life, and using the movies as documentary production. Okay, I was just watching a movie on Blackbeard's history, where he raided up and down the Atlantic coast, and at first he didn't kill anyone. He threatened to harm whoever was on board the ships that they were raiding, and they turned over all their goodies and golds and gems and dollar bills. That was his historical history. The movies of life and the stories that we see, videos such as, let's say, just a documentary on Blackbeard, of course, are also taken from a specific point of view. Some are that he was a bad guy. Some was like he wasn't as bad as they made out to be. He was forced into the position partially because the economics of the war, French Indian War, or back in 1705, 1710, 1715. And he was also, all of those pirates were actually hired in many cases to plunder and attack foreign ships. So it was all convoluted, who's on whose side when they want to be, and who you want to be for or against. This entire situation is a continuous historical heritage that is repeating over and over again. We have the same events going on now in Ukraine, China, Russia, America, Europe, taking sides based on various, Persia, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Gaddafi, Omar Khayyam, and anybody else who is part of this simulated storyline that keeps being ad nauseum. So we've got definitely in current events reflections and denominations involved in these, the parties of which are often seen either as in America Republican or Democrat, or in Europe as Protestant and Catholic, way back in Elizabethan times. Victoria, the English against the French. And then you've got nationalities or races, and the entire thing of competing for resources, product, economics, control, humanity's leveraged and enslaved. We've got almost every single movie you can think of is using one of these themes, and always in a bipolar or sometimes the three-dimensional perspective, that is two sides with the let's say, United Nations, supposedly working in a neutral, universal fashion, which is not the case. Again, quite controlled. Same thing goes for the secret governments and the secret agencies, which are, again, hundreds of movies covering these factions. I'm thinking of, in America, there was a movie made about the people working on, it was called The Good American, and they're working on the program to identify dangers in the dangers of foreign invasion. But what they ended up doing, the patriots, so-called, taking over these good-natured CIA and programming people who were working for the CIA or the government organization to identify through the electronic communications who was endangering our well-being. And what happened was the Bushes came in and decided to eliminate these operatives, not physically, just firing them, taking them off the case. They rewrote the program, and this was in 2000, true history. And when they rewrote the program, they turned it into a Patriot Act vehicle so that they could follow all Americans' communications and sell this, make this available to the communications industry so that they could then later on first propagandize the humanity, but secondly, they would use it to disavow their the freedom of our personal rights, and made it look like they were our friends, while all they're really doing is working for the corporate monopolies and media body of Confederates in the another civil war to get control of the people's consciousness. And that's exactly what really happened. They allowed 911 to happen, purposely being or not, because the program that they had then installed or rewrote was ineffective in identifying the real dangers or the actual invitees, that would be the foreign nationalists and military operators who are against the American continent and the Europeans. The Arabians, and this is part of that, related to the government and control and the oil and gas public industries were highlighted as needing protection, when in fact they were the ones who were illustrating the use of all of this protective manipulation.
Yeah, they nazified the government's what they did. They finished up what they started in 1934.
Yeah, can you think of a movie vehicle yourself that was a particular of this kind?
Not right off the head, not right off my head that they would
No.
that they could show that they could stoop this low, but the Bushes are known for stooping really, really low. And they are not patriots at all. They are cold-blooded Nazis. They've been all their lives.
Okay. Now,
they've done everything to overthrow what the constitutional type of government we have left, which is there's nothing left. They destroyed it.
so this makes me relate to you. It's a good thing, probably, not to point direct fingers at individuals and bodies of official documentation, because they use that. The same reason that they're using all this media and that they're tapping, trapping, advertising, modifying, and eliminating freedom of speech, or at least the opportunity to be effective with our viewpoints, because they're allowing us all to express the viewpoints. And what's occurring is that they're using that. They're using their entitlement to identify and then allow these conspiracist theories to proliferate on purpose, because it identifies them as some form of goodwill and patriotic and humanistic position, whereas really it seems that what we have now is an extreme extension of the same purpose agenda that you've mentioned, beginning back in the late 30s, which created World War II and or promulgated the entire military-industrial complex.
Yep.
And the economic takeover.
And another thing, Peter, they had prior knowledge that all this would work, because they have been able to time travel, and so they traveled in time and ahead. They have all these records that they can check back on to see what works and what doesn't work, and they've got a terrible advantage over us by being able to do that, and that's why they've been able to be so successful at what they're doing. That's a problem, and I don't know how we're going to get around it.
That's a good point. Now, there are a number of other movies that have been an interest, many of them regarding this history. One of them is the Mafia employment, and there's a movie about the Jewish mafia guy who was part of the Godfather series, and I believe, and also we'll mention within that regard the death of James Caan recently, which Fred and I talked about recently. James Caan had trouble in business in his later years, and he had been hooked up with a mogul of a landlord malls, the largest mall in the state of Florida, as a friend. Actually, the largest mall in the world, I guess, or that of that kind of business promoter, and so. James Caan tried to do something which was in the mortgage business. He was in The Godfather and actually was one of the key members of the staff of the cast, because his role, he was to kill some of the other mafia family people, and the famous scene of shooting them at the toll booth, which he was very much a part of. And these things that people were relating as these actors who were playing these roles is a very interesting factor about this, because the people do not identify themselves in the roles that they're playing in the movies as actors playing roles.
Was this Colin, was he involved with Nixon too?
Colin. The only Colin I know is Colin Powell. Oh, you're making jokes.
No, there was a Colin that was a lawyer. I thought he was involved with Nixon back in the 70s.
Okay, yeah. I don't remember his name is Colin. There's Colin Powell, of course, the military guy. But
Well, I know about him. He's phony as they come.
Okay.
He's just a political hack.
Right.
Too bad that that the true reality of who these people really are.
The whole eventual history of mankind, in that sense. What we're really talking about is their simulated reality that's being projected, and that which is believed and accepted, and then promulgated ad nauseum in a repeat of history and events. That's what we mean. In James Caan's case, as the mafia adjutant with Marlon Brando in the Corleones, I noticed that the actors play roles that, although they're not exactly the same as their real life personalities, they are in a way carrying out roles which assist the promulgation of these false ideas and views of reality. The actors are allowing these views of reality to be expressed and manipulated and denominated around the world. Especially, it's a very, very strong, intense media program that is constant, never-ending, and whatever the third term is, that it relatively speaking describes to us a false view of reality or a fabricated view, such as kings and queens, lawyers, military operators, business people, lovers, relationship, educators, teachers, professors. I call myself Professor Catfun sometimes. You know, it's just a term. It has no reality. But we're talking about this in the same way that when we're viewing this talk, it gives our subtitles. And then we have words which are expressed by us, which are supposedly the truth. But they're not true at all. I mean, they're just descriptions that we're sharing. The real truth isn't in words. Now, the discussion is about what do we do about it, really? These movies and producing, acting media, the reel-to-reel domino, which is the opposite of what reel-to-reel should be about. Movies should be describing reality and or history in such a way that they're actually revealing the reality as it's being created or is being viewed. But what we have is instead a historical record, a past viewpoint that gets presented. And it helps to present more viewpoints that are in agreement with it, which would be more movies of the same kind. That is, let's make violence movies about the violent histories, and then let's describe them so that we can get people to do more violence, which is what is happening. You'll see the copycats of children going into schools and killing other children. Holy mackerel.
Well, let's start back in 1908. That's when the communists took over the endowments, and they planned the overthrow of the United States and Russia. And the question was asked, why Russia and why the United States? Well, they didn't have a lot of population to have to conquer, and they had a lot of natural resources for them to steal. And so in 1909, they met and planned the destruction of both the United States and Russia through endless wars and through the mighty education system. Even if they said if it took them 100 years, they accomplished it, which they did, and they didn't take them 100 years either. So World War I was commenced right after the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Europe had fought themselves into a bankruptcy almost. And so with the opening of the Treasury of the United States, they had now money enough to go ahead and start the wars again. And that lasted till 1916. And Germany decided they got fed up with the war and want to know why they were fighting the war in the first place, and sent out peace treaties out to try to get countries to finally come to peace. And Warburg heard that and went to Europe and met with Britain and France, and he says, don't sign a peace treaty. And Britain and France said, well, we can't do it, not without the United States. Warburg says, no problem, I got just a blackmail for old Wilson. And so within a year, the United States was in the war. And then the Treaty of Versailles, I guess that's, if I've got it right, was just a setup for Hitler to come in. I think he was their big boy for their New World Order. The big banks backed him up with a lot of money and set him up to, which being a little bit all cocky in their head, and moved a little bit too quick before he was really ready. If he would have waited 2 more years, we'd be all speaking German and Japanese. And then we go fast forward to the Second World War, and voila, we are where we are today, in a communist takeover of the world. Bought and paid for by the Federal Reserve bankers at the, I guess that the poor American people had to pay for. And we still are. We're still indebted to that war. I guess we'll be there indebted for at least 100 years. Everybody got their debt reprieved, but not the United States. That's our reward for producing enough products to bring that war to an end. And as for that, I guess that'll be it to me for, we were officially time traveling in 1968. Andrew Borsaro and his father traveled from Philadelphia to New Mexico. I think it was 2,000 miles. And they did that in a little less than 2 seconds. And the start of time travel is officially going. And I understand by the year 2028, you'll be able to time travel commercially. That's just right around the corner. 6 years.
That's interesting. We talk about movies that are related, so I'm going to go to Blade Runner. I'm reminded of another movie called The Dead Zone. How life reflects life. You see, that's really what we're trying to say. And how do we concern ourselves with either creating a reality or, as a movie producer, creating our own life or creating our own film viewpoint for a production which a lot of people do, in the sense that they'll live a certain kind of lifestyle and they know that their life is going to be usable as a production model. And they're going to make money off it, of course. And, you know, that's part of the idea somehow. And people get it in their egos that this is a good thing. So I'll become Bonnie and Clyde or something like that because they feel obligated or forced, and they're only one avenue that makes sense to them for survival, which means, you know, become a bank robber or a thief or something else. And that's just one example, but of course there's a huge number of movies about bank robbers, and they're highly popularized. We could also take the theft of life and property that are demonstrated in movies where we have these defenders of the faith, so-called, like James Bond, who's out there protecting our bond. And he has to kill for it, and he's legally allowed to kill. So let's make that a real thing, and everybody's going to think how cool, which they did. And Sean Connery, the most effective one. But in the last Bond, there was a very interesting development that he was actually killed at the end of the movie. And in his justifications for allowing himself to be killed or put in that position where he knew he was in highly critical condition, yes, that actor, in a sense, is playing out the role to have himself eliminated because he wants to get out of the Bond character too. He's had enough. Daniel Craig. Yeah, all of these roles are part of that media bombardment, which has occurred. I would say it goes all the way back to the beginning of film in 1900. And there is a movie that was produced in 1905 or something like that. It was about a Western gunfighter, or made a couple of movies made by this actual Western gunfighter. Really, he was a bank robber. He wasn't a gunfighter at all. And he was forced into, in his real life, in 1870 or whatever, as a youth, accused of horse stealing, falsely accused. And so he decided if they're going to throw him in jail for this stuff, he might as well just, you know, go do it anyway. He liked to gamble. And this is a little known story. They've never made a movie about this individual. I have the book. It's called Gunfighters of the Old West or something like that. Excellent book. And it's just a little paperback, but you know, some of those books they produced back in the day were really good reads. Anyway, so this character actually had a life of bank robbing. He went to jail and spent a lot of time in jail. He never wanted to harm anyone in the robberies and prided himself on it. But there was one of his co-conspirators, or might have been another lawman, but he wasn't on the good side. And he had to kill him for whatever reason in self-defense, more than likely. And so Henry Starr is his name. It would be a fantastic movie script. And I could see like Matt Damon and Ben Affleck playing these roles and going for it. But I wrote out a whole idea for a script, which included the filmmaking that this guy did in 1905 when he was quite a bit older. And so he made the movie. It wasn't that successful, but he was in Hollywood, Los Angeles. And then he left and went back. He had to go back for some reason to Oklahoma. And yeah, well, he had to go back into the bank robbing because he didn't make the money making the movie, and for whatever reasons. But in his last moments, he decided to do two bank robberies in the same day. And I could be wrong. It might have been that was not his last robbery. So let's just say on his last robbery, what happened was he was caught in the jail. I mean, in the bank, and there was a shootout. But he was acting as a defender of the people in the bank, and so he got shot. He didn't die right away. It took 3 days or something. And so he talked about his life and his deathbed. And, but he was almost a good guy. What he did was, with a lot of the money he made, he gave it to people. He took it back and gave it to the family. He gave it to the farmers or someone else. In other words, he was a good guy. And he was taking the money that he thought, in some ways, the banks had stolen from people, which is true.
Yes,
so
it's
Henry
true.
Starr is an example. Truly, that's a movie that's never been made, but his movie was a life story. And he did things like he robbed trains, and he saved these girls from being taken advantage of. And then one of the girls came with him back to the camp out, and became his wife.
Yeah.
And like that, it's a great story, really great. All right. The movie idea I had with Henry Starr was to turn it into a modern day where he remembers his past lives. And in the modern day, he's trying to make movies and the producers are ripping him off. And so they go in and decide to rob the producers. And that's a concurrent story going on at the same time that the past life history of his lifetime was of that story of Henry Starr is being made into a movie and demonstrated, or let's say actually shown as it was real events. The whole thing about the production and the control of the vehicles, which is always being dominated by the moguls, let's say, movie moguls are a huge part of this relationship. How did they use actresses like Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein, also not in movies, but same thing, working with Trump or friends with Trump and taking advantage of a huge number of women. Bill Cosby, huge example of the same thing.
Epstein, I had his business was cloning. That was his real business. This guy's got clones everywhere of all of these guys. I don't think he even our 41st president, I don't think he's dead. I think he's been cloned. That's the power these guys got. They don't ever die. They just keep cloning them.
41st president, who is that?
George H.R.W. Bush.
Oh.
Clinton was 42, Bush 2 was 43, Obama 44, Trump 45, Biden 46.
You point out a very interesting point about the relevance of certain technologies. When they reveal these technologies, it says, now we think we're able to do cloning, and we've just got the first sheep that's going to be cloned. Okay.
Yeah, they've been doing it. They've been doing it for a while. They've got that down. They've got it. They did a lot of cloning on Mars. That was one of the things those machines they had would do. They would be able to save their lives, and then they would turn them and clone them into and move their souls out of one body and put it in another body. These guys, what they're able to do is fantastic. You just don't believe they can do that in the physical world.
Without naming names, you're saying these guys, this old terms are Illuminati and other something like that. Is that what you generally mean?
No, that's way above. These guys way above those guys.
These guys are way above their
We're talking like guys like Cheney. Cheney's now running the operation on Mars. He's been running that for a while. I don't know who had it before, but it's when you're all based in everything you do is in secrecy. They're well protected by big money, and that means the banks.
I get that part about the well protected, but secondly, I go back to, without going into an argumentative, to say, hey, I don't think these bulbs are that bright.
They are. They have a lot of interaction with ETs. People don't understand that. ETs are well hidden here, but they're quite active. I still wish we could get Alina on. She would cover a lot of this area. She's been involved in a lot of that, negotiating with them.
So we have ITs, yeah.
Yep, we got
so
them
we
all.
have ITs, ETs, and DTs.
Whatever you. I mean, there's some of these people that are hard to look at, like the praying mantises, an 8-foot praying mantis. Can you imagine trying to communicate with somebody like that?
I'm going to back up to the point about when they're revealing certain technologies, what they're actually revealing is the existence of them as completed, and they're suggesting that it's not, and that is an indoctrination that allows for its proliferation. That was their intention, but the proliferation has not been presented as an actuality at the point where they're saying, okay, we now have cloning of sheep, and it's illegal to clone, and we want everybody to know you can't do it, because not because it's a bad thing, but because, although they're saying that it's a bad thing.
Well, that's a bunch of baloney. These people don't have any barriers, none whatsoever. They're not like where we have 6 million laws telling us what we can and cannot do. They're above all of that.
They have no restrictions.
They have absolutely no restrictions. They're free to do whatever they want, to whoever they want, whatever they want, take whatever they want.
That's why they call it Americans.
Well, I don't know if you would call it American, but I think America's been stolen from us.
Yeah, I meant American. I can. I am. I can. That's that's my joke. They're Americans, and we live in Amazonia, which is Bozos, Amazonia, you know, Amazonia. That's my calling of it. Now, that's not accurate because he's also just a plebe. At some level, you could call him lower level, an adjutant, not a general.
Agitators.
Agitator. Well, you know, an adjutant, like generals have adjutants.
Agitator.
Adjutant. You know what an adjutant is in the military. You know.
Well, I was in the Navy, so I can go up to admirals, but when it comes to other services, I'm a little ignorant about them.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, you were Navy.
I was Navy.
And so was my family, not my cousins. We're half Norwegian. So.
Well, you'd be Navy.
And my cousins are all Norwegian.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they were in the Navy.
That's how you made your living.
That's
how you made your. That's fishing was their main.
Yeah.
Source.
You do realize it's oil also. They're a big time oil producer.
You mean from fish?
I guess you could say that. I don't really know. That would make more sense, but I think they also have oil in the more traditional viewpoint.
Oh, well, it's been around for a while.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, let's raise this up a bit. We are talking about how these movie actors and characters and conditions, historical references, are being applied or being accepted, and that it is a media manipulation and a monopoly medium. It's the media's medium of delivery systems to provide consciousness control, i.e., yes, advertising. And now it's getting to a state where people are recognizing how big the control is at the same time. Go ahead.
It's massive. Massive control. We're so controlled it's not even funny anymore. The news is completely controlled. We're so controlled. I don't know how we even function every day.
Well, let me ask you something or share something about this control function, because I've talked with people who I've said, you're following the news, and I want you to know that, I mean, you do realize how much that they're verifying the content from their point of view as a control advertisement and marketing ploy, and also a vicious hypnographic model.
Yeah, all of that.
So, you know, I try to say, hey, you know, you're being documented that way. Not only that, they're documenting everything that you listen and hear and watch. So then they feed that back to us and say, oh, you like this, so here's some more of the same. Keep yourself flagellated, if that's the right word, and flagulated. And so it is absolutely the case, and they really don't want to recognize it. They're afraid of it, or they do recognize it and they just don't want to talk about it, not directly. They won't have to look at themselves and the operation of that objectivity. Okay. I know that it makes it harder for people to think. I think it's affecting my ability to make references and memory usage, and they're feeding off of that as well. And then they throw all these drugs at the people because that way they think, you know, take these drugs and you can delimit your dyslexia and your autism and your dementia. So they take drugs, which probably the least affects even more of those same side effects. And because there really are side effects. We're not supposed to have dementia. We're not supposed to be dyslexic and autistic. This was programmed in the medical operation.
Yeah,
and we are really getting into some very heavy stuff here, because this is exactly the stuff that we share. It's going to feed off it more with the people who watch it, even if we have the good nature and the good intent to provide the true reality. We cannot. And we're actually observing the false realities and the fabricated positions ad nauseum, actually. And that's a hard thing for us as well to confront. What would it be to say, what are we here for with the NUUU, with the true reality, respectful presentation, with the observations, but also the actuality of having the real awareness, which is really all we need in order to disembowel that program and to allow ourselves into the true reality position, the all-isness, recognition, and intention of actuality, making ourselves real. We're really making our own movie, and we have to recognize this. When we recognize that we've been making our own movie all this time, but we've always been making it based on the realities that are being communicated or promulgated, or patriarchal, hierarchical friendships, family, friends, sex, race, nations, etc. All of that, those developments, which were created really as a controlled modulation, especially birthing children and family, occupation, life purposes, because that's the easiest way to keep people plugged into and objectified into the reality that they're in, the simulated version.
All right, you got me thinking about one thing. This is all has to do with their excuses to call overpopulation. This is what this is all about. This is an excuse that they've been using for years. And it's bull. I can give you a simple mathematical calculations that you can use to put an end to that stupid crap in the first place. You can take 171 million acres in Texas, you multiply it by 43,681 square feet. In other words, you take those acres and you put them and convert it to square feet. That gives you 7.5 trillion square feet. You take that and divide it by a 7.6 billion population, that gives you a linear foot of 1 foot wide and 1,000 foot long. You take the square root of that, and it gives you 31.6 feet by 31.6 feet. That's a square. 31.6 feet by 31.6 feet. Put a dot right in the center, put a square next to it, and a dot next to it. That's 31 feet apart. That's for every man, woman, and child on Earth in Texas. That's how much baloney this overpopulation is. It's comedy. I thought I'd add that in.
You're quite the mathematician, Ronald.
Those numbers can be repeated by anybody with a 2-bit calculator. You take 31.6 feet by 31.6 feet. That gives you 1,000 square feet. That's how you check it.
Okay. I want to share with you something on the life story that I'm related to, and that is my father. He was a executive CPA. He worked at 666 Fifth Avenue, and I've worked there. I worked there during the Woodstock Day, 1969, the Friday. He was an exceptional accountant and showed me a number of mathematical tricks for memorizing and being aware of multiplying, divide, etc. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I relate to the figures, but actually what I'm using these for is a program I'm writing to predict the lottery. I'm using the solar positions, we'll say, very simplified, degrees and numbers. Has nothing to do with some kind of astrological characterization. This is simply a mathematical formula that goes not one level, but 4 levels of positions. Most of the common, let's say, astrologers, they use 1 level of positions. They're one-dimensional in their viewpoint, and they do not see that there are at least 4 dimensions. I'm going to say actually there's 5 by which we can have in creation, which have some form of a numerical reference attended to them. Actually, all the levels do, quite naturally. But this coordination of mathematical positioning can be done and is being done. And I'm on the verge, I would say, of being able to actually predict this 100% accurate. Actually, I did last week, but I mean 100% with no plus or minus factors, you know, 100% plus or minus 5% or something like that. Okay, it doesn't matter because the numbers don't really matter. When we really are talking about reality, what the movie makers are making doesn't matter. What's true or not really doesn't matter. What matters is what is really the true reality life is. It has nothing to do with the fact that, well, not criticizing your comments at all, using it to reference Texas as the state that could hold the majority of mankind quite easily. Okay. It doesn't matter the figures, whether Texas absolutely is the size to use to describe it. It's a good definition. It's something everyone relates to. That wouldn't be the point, though. The point is, what is the reality, and are we limited by let's say, this so-called size of what the United States is, or what the size of the planet is? Yeah, you're pointing out it's not a fixed size. It's not real at all. In one sense, it's got I've heard people talk about it being waves, and a certain kind of, the poles, as an example, have this wave of, there's a curvature to space between the poles. Now, I don't know, you might have been part of listening to that. Val talked about it, I think, in another video. And this curvature of space and time is the same thing that happens in 2 different ways. One is when we're watching a movie or television, we can get this distortion of the pictures. And I have videos, which I'm going to share here, for you and for us. I call them digit artists. And they're videos I take off of the TV where the picture is distorted by the signal coming through, and it's especially strong and active during movies and major sports events, especially during major human action activity events. I'll see these screen pictures distorted in all kinds of ways, the pixelated changes, diminishing, parts being double screened, people coming in and out of the screens from different parts of the movie and or the event. Especially true when these emotional public events like sporting events and America's Got Talent. And I have some spectacular videos that I've made putting these together. One of them I made with a song called Make No Mistakes. And in that song, which I wrote and put as a soundtrack, I'm describing this idea that the only way to really be good or live well is just don't make mistakes. You can do whatever, but don't make mistakes, because it doesn't matter what you do, but if you make mistakes, you're going to have to go back and replay it or repay it or do some kind of adjustment, no matter what.
Also depends on your definition of
mistake.
Adjustment, the mistakes.
Yes.
As long as my theory is, as long as you don't hurt somebody or damage someone's property, you should be pretty well okay.
Yeah, I'm being a little bit more like my father, the accountant here, because I'm saying, like, if I'm going to go out to the store or do something like that, I've noticed if I forget to do things in the there's kind of an order that's being lined up every time I go out. And if I follow that order generally and not get sidetracked, it is it works out fine. But if let's say I go out at the wrong time, I'm going to get all this resistance. And that's another one, you're choosing the times to do things. And so the reason I'm talking about making sure to not make mistakes as much as possible is not so much because it's bad to make small mistakes, and you don't want to make big mistakes, harmful mistakes, yes, because then you really have to pay the piper. Otherwise, you don't really have to pay. But I've noticed if I go out at the wrong time, I'm going to get all these blocks in my way, and I'm just not in tune, and it's just not flowing. But when I go out at the right time, it's bing, bang, boom, really good. And I always have something happen too that I wasn't expecting, which is on the good side when I'm in that tune spot. So what I'm sharing about is, here we're talking about the NUUU and having some vehicle of awareness and intention that keeps us on the tracks, that keeps us not the tracks of the simulator and how they're trying to control us, but on our own vehicle.
You need to come up with a definition for NUUU. Exactly how does it work?
Well, it doesn't work in the specifics. What it works is at the moment, at least now, it is a vehicle of attunement with the all is. And that's all it is. It's not a working formula trying to say you do NUUU and then you're going to be able to think better, or you're going to think
it's a frequency.
Magically.
It's a frequency that tune sets up.
Right,
that makes it easier. It makes it easier for you to get into the higher worlds.
Right, but
flow with the sound.
Okay. Oh, this is important. I'm going to share with you. You have a certain frequency, and you have a certain point of view, and you used your terms, which are sharing it, such as when you are focused uh, uh, um, you get into the higher worlds. Now,
You ride the waves.
Okay, that's a viewpoint. I'm going to share a different viewpoint. I'm going to say all NUUU does is get you where you are in the waves, if you will, or in the real world. It's not higher worlds, it's not lower worlds, it's not a vibrational difference. It is a reality always here now. And then from that position, whatever you do is okay. Whatever you're operating from is some part of, you could call it the higher worlds that are here, or our relations to the all, that is some form of wherever we are, which might be in one of the higher, so-called higher worlds, which they call, let's say you're tuning in emotionally on something, that's the astral world. That's not so high, and it's not high really to speak of, because I'm trying to say is the point of view is like putting yourself either looking up towards the sun and going into the sun, or being in the sun, sending the waves out, or being part of seeing the waves and the world through the light of the sun, looking back. That's a context that I've been using a lot, where I'm inside the sun, or I'm of the sun, looking back down at the world. And you see, the reason I'm saying I think that's, I'm going to say my own advertisement here is, hey, I don't know anybody who's written 500 songs in the last 10 years, okay? I must be in some kind of sunlight. You know, something has worked here. And I've been doing NUUU the entire 10 years. And I'm not doing like hour-long chants at all. I'm not even doing NUUU. Sometimes, like this morning, I woke up and it was like, well, I did do an exercise that with it a little bit, hardly any NUUU at all. But what I got was, once I'm finished, let's say, and I get up, it's like, or sometimes even when I get up and haven't done this, I get this, you know what, you're in the state right now. You don't need to go. You don't need to go to. You're in the state now. And it would be like saying, yes, I'm part of your objective view. I'm in Texas. And yes, I'm one of the people, and I'm living in the world that's got enough room for everybody.
Right.
I'm in that world now. I accept it. How about that?
All it is just showing you that you can put every living human being in Texas and you'd have the whole world vacant. And I'm simply showing what people should be able to see for themselves. In the wave, in the groove.
All right. Now that's a step. I get that. That's a view that's part of a step. The funny thing is, where I'm looking at you here on the steps, but you are on top of the steps, looking backwards at me. You're like the sun shining in that sense. You're already there. You don't need to do the steps. You're there. And that is the true reality, actually. And I was sharing my view that was, well, I am really in the state of asses in Texas ass. What I mean is, that's one view, but another less funny view maybe, or more enlightened, is, hey, I'm part of the true reality life is, and I'm in the world of the true reality that has enough room for everything and everyone and all beings, all isness. It's so much larger than Texas. And at the same time, it's not large at all. You could fit it on a dot of a nucleon. That's what they say. Everything is in that one little dot. Okay, there is no space-time dimension or dimension, depending on our point of view. Are we in dementia? Or are we in the real dimensions, the real universes? Wow, Ronald, thank you very much for allowing us both to express here. Oh, we're into it. Great. It's exactly what we're trying to get to.
We're simply trying to get to the top so we don't have to mess around with all these lower worlds and lower heavens and yeah, just beat it to the top and not have to go through all of this ever again. Beat these reincarnations after reincarnations, and to end our travel, our voyage through all of this.
I've got a vision for you with that. The top, like you're at a pyramid, which is, but I'm saying let's use a pyramid as an example. If you take the pyramid shape and you invert it, you get a 6-pointed star, the Star of David. If you take the pyramid and put it like at the top point and make another pyramid, that is, and make a reverse pyramid that comes down, that's hanging up in it. It's like an hourglass, so to speak.
You mean the point down?
Yeah, one points down and the other's pointing up, and they meet in the middle. And that point is where you're on both this side and that other side, let's say, or the real side, and you are a free being of light. They're a sun shining. You are that whole figure. Okay, it's still a figure. It's still a metaphoric viewpoint of a concept of what might be this. Okay, it's just a metaphor, but that's how people make movies and share the reality of life in the same sense. That's how we're creating our reality. That's really a perspective. Yes, maybe just a perspective, but I would say there's something very, very dynamic and emphatic about that, and beautiful.
Well, we're just trying to get the information out there to the people that who haven't been
quite open to it,
or been exposed to it to even understand it.
Yes.
And once we are able to open some of that up, I do believe that we can open this world up a little bit more. Maybe bring a little bit more peace and quiet to it. Until that happens, there ain't nothing going to be.
Well, that's what we're going to stop with this here. I'm saying because the Great Reset is, whatever that is, it's objectifying something which could be one, could be the other. It might just be the lower pyramid making itself even more visible. And as an example here, the missing part of the pyramid is, I would say, myself, which is not visible, but I am here, and that pyramid is here. And I sometimes call it a diamond also. You could put it like a diamond. You take the two V's of a pyramid and you put them bottom to top against each other, and you've got a pyramid, 4-pointed pyramid, diamond rather. And that's, I think, more of what we could say our soul really is. It's a diamond in the ocean, which is one of my songs, Diamond in the Ocean. I'm going to go to my video. One's the Diamond in the Ocean song, and that's about sharing the NUUU, actually, mostly. And Make No Mistakes, which is about the conspiracies and, objectivity of that we've been talking about, objectification. Anyway, let's do NUUU and finish, and then I'll make sure before we leave to send the videos over. Let me do that before we sing.
NUUU.
one recommendation is to do NUUU, 5 U's with 2 and 5. Do it 5 times, some form of 5 times with the NUUU. That's just something I've heard within myself recently.
Well,
so
show them what you're talking about.
Yeah, I just did it. NUUU, NUUU. That's it.
That's it? All right.
And thanks very much. Perfect. Hour and a half exactly.
All right. Sounds good. Bye-bye.
Make no mistakes. Don't take the breaks. Mystery. Everything is here you see. The hard rock of love. Built to the sky. Here in the other. Take it to the real side. The siren song anymore. The women, the money, the dogs. What do you find in your eyes? Third eyes are here, listening here. It's all about time. They've got you fixed on that line. TV, radio, telephone, everything in videos. Everybody's locked into their eye. Unless you set your mind, you think you're free. But you're what you see. Not what you believe, what you gotta can't Who make me smile? Tell a joke on your eyes. Make you believe something that isn't here. Everywhere.